The morning fog clung to the grass like a shroud as Alexander Pierce cut through the park, his $600 running shoes striking the path with mechanical precision. 5 years since Sarah's death, and still the emptiness followed him everywhere, from his penthouse overlooking the city to the halls of Pierce Industries where employees scattered before his approach. This morning ritual was his only peace. Until he saw her. A girl, barely 20, sprawled unconscious on a bench, her body curled protectively around 3 tiny bundles. The infant's weak cries pierced the dawn silence, a desperate summons that stopped Alexander mid-stride. Their mother's lips were blue with cold, her fingers still clutching a tattered blanket edge even in unconsciousness. One moment of hesitation, then something long dormant awakened inside him. Some decisions change everything. This would be one of them. Alexander Pierce never touched strangers. The tabloids called him the Ice King not just for his ruthless business acumen but for the impenetrable wall he'd built around himself since the accident. Yet here he was, kneeling in dew-soaked grass, his Italian suit collecting dirt as he pressed 2 fingers against the girl's neck. "She's alive," he muttered, more to himself than to Dominic, his security chief hovering uncertainly nearby. Pulse is weak, though. The baby's cries grew more insistent, tiny fists punching the air, faces scrunched and reddened with effort. One had kicked free of its thin blanket, revealing a diaper fashioned from what looked like a cut-up t-shirt. "Call an ambulance," Alexander ordered, already shrugging off his cashmere coat. "It's rush hour, sir," Dominic replied. "EMS response time in this area is. Then we'll take them ourselves." The decisiveness in Alexander's voice surprised even him. He wrapped his coat around the 3 infants, bundling them together. Their skin felt cool to the touch, too cool. When he lifted them, their weight stunned him. 3 babies shouldn't feel so light. His throat tightened. "Sir, with respect," Dominic began, "we don't know who these people are. There could be legal implications if..." "There are legal implications if we leave them here to die," Alexander snapped. The fierceness in his voice was something his employees hadn't heard in years. "Help me get her to the car." Dominic hesitated only a moment before carefully lifting the unconscious girl. Close up, her youth was even more apparent, just a teenager, really. Her clothes were clean but threadbare, patched in places. A small, tarnished locket hung around her neck. Alexander carried the infants with unexpected gentleness, cradling them against his chest as they made their way to his waiting Bentley. Morning joggers slowed to stare at the strange procession: the famous billionaire, his dark-suited security man, an unconscious girl, and 3 crying babies. "Pierce Estate," Alexander instructed his driver, settling into the back seat with the infants. "And call Dr. Winters. Tell her it's an emergency." The 20-minute drive felt interminable. One of the babies, the smallest, had stopped crying, its eyes drifting closed. Alexander found himself jostling the infant gently. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Just stay with me." When they arrived at the estate, the massive iron gate swung open silently. Mrs. Fenton, his housekeeper of 15 years, stood waiting at the entrance, confusion evident on her face as the strange party emerged from the car. "Mr. Pierce," she began, then stopped short at the sight of the unconscious girl and the infants in her employer's arms. "Clear the blue guest suite," Alexander instructed. "And find formula, diapers, whatever babies need. Now." The mansion burst into uncharacteristic activity. Staff who had grown accustomed to the mausoleum-like quiet of the place rushed to prepare rooms, make calls, gather supplies. Alexander carried the infants into the warm house himself, refusing to relinquish them even as Mrs. Fenton tried to take them. "Sir," she said gently, "let me help while you change. You're soaked through." Alexander looked down, suddenly aware of his mudded suit, the baby urine soaking through his shirt. The smallest infant had curled against his chest, tiny fingers clutching his tie. Something about that desperate grip made his chest ache in a way he hadn't felt since Sarah. "I'm fine," he said. "Just show me where to put them down." In the guest suite, the unconscious girl was laid gently on the bed while Alexander placed the infants on a hastily arranged nest of blankets nearby. Dr. Winters arrived within minutes, her medical bag in hand, face professionally neutral despite the unusual circumstances. "What happened?" she asked, already examining the girl. "I found them in the park." She was unconscious. "The babies?" Alexander's voice faltered. "The babies don't look good." Dr. Winters moved with efficient calm, checking vitals, inserting N4 line, examining each infant in turn. "Severe malnutrition," she concluded grimly. "Dehydration. The mother, is she the mother, has probably been giving everything she has to keep these babies alive. At her own expense." Alexander stood by the window, watching as the doctor worked. Outside, the sun had burned away the morning fog, revealing a perfect spring day. Yacht clubs would be full. Country clubs bustling. The world spinning on in its privileged orbit, while in this room, 4 lives hung by a thread. "Will they make it?" he asked quietly. Dr. Winters didn't look up from her work. "That depends on how long they've been like this. And how much fight they have left." Alexander Pearce, who hadn't prayed since the night Sarah died, found himself making silent bargains with a God he'd long since stopped believing in. Maya awoke to the unfamiliar sensation of softness. For a moment, disorientation kept her perfectly still, eyes closed, cataloging sensations. Smooth sheets. A mattress that didn't sag or poke. Warmth. Silence. The silence jolted her fully awake. No babies crying. No traffic noise. No shelter residents arguing. Her eyes flew open as panic surged through her body. "My babies." The words tore from her throat before she could even process the strange room, the 4 in her arm, the tall windows framing an impossible view of manicured gardens. She tried to sit up, but dizziness forced her back down. The door opened immediately, revealing a middle-aged woman in a crisp uniform who approached with practiced calm. "The babies are fine," the woman said, her voice gentle but firm. "They're sleeping in the nursery down the hall. Dr. Winters is with them." "Who are you? Where am I?" Maya's voice cracked with fear. "I need to see my brothers and sister now." The door opened again, and a man entered. Tall, broad-shouldered, in his early 40s, dressed in clothes that even Maya's inexperienced eye could tell cost more than she'd ever earned in her life. Something about his face triggered a vague memory, a magazine cover, perhaps, or a news segment. "You're at my home," he said, staying near the doorway as if sensing her unease. "I found you in the park this morning. You were unconscious. The babies were crying." Maya's hand flew to her throat, finding her mother's locket still there. "Small mercies. I need to see them. Please." He nodded to the woman, who disappeared silently. "Mrs. Fenton will bring them. They've been fed and changed. The doctor says they're responding well, but they're severely underweight." Shame burned through Maya's exhaustion. She'd failed them. She'd promised her mother as she lay dying that she would keep them together, keep them safe. Instead, they'd ended up helpless before a stranger whose name she didn't even know. "I'm Alexander Pierce," he said, as if reading her thoughts. The name registered dimly. Pierce Technologies. Pierce Media Group. The man was a billionaire, one of those figures who existed in a world entirely separate from hers. Mrs. Fenton returned, pushing what looked like an expensive hotel bassinet. Inside, the triplets lay swaddled in soft blankets, clean, peaceful, their tiny chests rising and falling in steady rhythm. Maya's eyes filled with tears as she counted them by name in a whispered litany: Ellie, Theo, Milo. "They're beautiful children," Alexander said quietly. "And fighters, clearly. The doctor says they wouldn't have survived much longer in those conditions." The blunt assessment pierced Maya like a knife. "I tried," she whispered, not to him but to the babies. "I tried so hard." "I know." Something in his voice made her look up. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a shadow of understanding that surprised her. "When was the last time you ate a real meal?" Maya couldn't remember. The past months had blurred into a desperate routine: beg for odd jobs during the day, hunt for safe sleeping spots at night, share whatever food she could get with the babies first. Her own hunger had become background noise, constant but ignorable. Until yesterday, when the dizziness had overtaken her in the park. "The doctor says you're severely malnourished and dehydrated," Alexander continued when she didn't answer. "You need rest. Food. Time to recover." Fear replaced relief as the initial panic subsided. Nothing came without cost, especially not the help of rich strangers. "I can't pay you," she said, lifting her chin slightly. "For any of this." Something flickered across Alexander's face: surprise, perhaps, or respect. "I'm not asking for payment." "Then what do you want?" The question came out sharper than she intended. For a moment, Alexander seemed genuinely taken aback. Then understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that looked almost like pain. "I want nothing from you," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "When you're strong enough, you can take the babies and go wherever you choose. Or you can stay until you have a plan. Either way, there are no strings attached." Maya had heard too many empty promises to believe him, but for now, the soft bed and the sight of the triplets sleeping peacefully overrode her suspicion. She would rest, recover her strength, and then figure out an escape plan if needed. "Thank you," she said finally, the words unfamiliar on her tongue. Alexander nodded once, then moved toward the door. "Mrs. Fenton will bring you something to eat. Something gentle on your stomach." As he left, Maya's gaze returned to the triplets. For the first time in months, they weren't crying from hunger or cold. Their faces were relaxed, peaceful. Even asleep, Ellie's hand reached out, finding Theo's arm in a gesture of connection that had been there since birth. "We're okay for now," she whispered to them. "I don't know what happens next, but we're okay for now." Outside the door, Alexander Pierce paused, hearing the girl's soft words to her siblings. Something inside his chest constricted painfully. For 5 years, he'd moved through life like a ghost, accumulating wealth and power that meant nothing without Sarah to share it with. Now, inexplicably, the sight of this broken family had awakened something he thought long dead. He straightened his shoulders and walked away. Whatever this feeling was, he couldn't afford to examine it too closely. Not yet. 3 days passed in a strange, suspended reality. Maya regained her strength gradually, her body greedily absorbing nutrients after months of deprivation. The triplets, too, showed remarkable improvement, their cries stronger, more demanding, their eyes more alert and focused. Alexander was a peripheral presence, appearing briefly each morning and evening, inquiring about their needs, then disappearing into his world of conference calls and business meetings. Maya watched him with cautious eyes, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. On the fourth evening, she felt strong enough to explore beyond her room. The babies were asleep under Mrs. Fenton's watchful eye, giving Maya a rare moment to herself. She wandered through the mansion's quiet hallways, feeling like an intruder in a museum after hours. The library door stood ajar, warm light spilling onto the corridor's polished floor. Maya hesitated, then peered inside. Alexander sat in a leather chair, a glass of amber liquid untouched beside him, staring at a framed photograph in his hands. She must have made some small sound, because he looked up suddenly, his expression unguarded for the first time since she'd met him. What she saw there, raw grief, painfully familiar, made her step into the room rather than retreat. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to intrude." Alexander set the photograph down but didn't turn it away. "You're not intruding. How are you feeling?" "Better. Stronger." Maya's eyes drifted to the photograph, a young girl with Alexander's eyes, laughing on a tire swing. "Your daughter?" A muscle in his jaw tightened. "Sarah. She would have been 11 this year." The past tense told Maya everything. "I'm sorry," she said again, the words inadequate but sincere. "Car accident," he said after a moment. 5 years ago. A drunk driver crossed the median. I was in Tokyo closing a business deal." Maya moved further into the room, drawn by the shared language of loss. "My mother died 6 months ago. Cancer." The triplets were 3 days old. Alexander looked up, truly seeing her perhaps for the first time. Not as a charity case or an obligation, but as someone who understood the particular geography of grief. "What happened to their father?" he asked. Maya's laugh held no humor. "Left when I told him I was pregnant. Turns out, one baby was scary enough. When the doctor said triplets, he was just gone. Blocked my number, moved out of state." "And your mother raised you alone?" "She cleaned houses during the day, offices at night. Put herself through nursing assistant classes." Pride straightened Maya's shoulders despite her exhaustion. She was amazing. Everyone loved her. She could walk into a room and just make people feel better. Alexander nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Sarah was like that. Even as a little girl. Her teachers always said she was the one who noticed when other kids were sad or left out." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. There was something unexpectedly easy about sharing memories with this stranger who understood loss in a way many pretended to but few actually did. "After my mother died," Maya said finally, "I tried to keep our apartment. I had a job at a daycare center, they let me bring the triplets with me. But then the owner sold the business, and the new management had policies about employees' children. Without that income, I couldn't make rent." Alexander listened without interrupting, without offering empty platitudes or solutions. Just presence. "I stayed with friends until they got tired of the babies crying all night. Tried shelters, but they separate men and women, and I couldn't leave the babies with strangers. Started sleeping in my car until it got repossessed." Maya shook her head, remembering. "You do what you have to do, day by day. You stop thinking about next week or next month. Just today. Just the next meal. The next safe place to sleep. And no one helped. Alexander asked, his voice carefully neutral. Maya's smile was sad but not bitter. People have their own problems. And triplets are, a lot. Even my mother's friends backed away. They'd offer to take one baby for an afternoon, but not all three. Never all three. Alexander looked down at the photograph of Sarah, then back at Maya. What's your plan now? Once you're recovered? The question hit her like cold water. She'd been so focused on immediate survival for so long that the concept of a plan seemed almost foreign. I don't know, she admitted. Find work, somehow. A place to stay. Keep the babies together. Her voice hardened with determination. I promised my mother I wouldn't let them get split up in the system. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made Maya want to look away. But she held his gaze, chin lifted slightly. She might be accepting his help, but she wouldn't cower. What was your mother's name? He asked unexpectedly. Elena. Elena Reyes. Alexander nodded as if committing it to memory. And yours? Maya. Maya, he repeated, testing the name. I have a proposition for you, Maya Reyes. One that might help you keep your promise to your mother. Maya's guard instantly rose. Experience had taught her that propositions from men, especially wealthy men, rarely favored women in her position. What kind of proposition? Something in her tone must have conveyed her suspicion because Alexander's expression shifted to one of horrified understanding. God, no, nothing like that, he said quickly. I'm talking about a job. Here. With housing included. Maya blinked, caught off guard. A job doing what? Mrs. Fenton is retiring next year. She's been after me to find someone she can train as her replacement. The position comes with the carriage house apartment on the property. It's small, but it has 2 bedrooms. More than enough space for you and the triplets. The offer was so unexpected, so far from anything Maya had anticipated, that she couldn't formulate a response. You don't have to answer now, Alexander continued. Think about it. Talk to Mrs. Fenton about what the job entails. If it's not for you, I understand. But the offer stands. Maya studied him, searching for the catch, the hidden motive. What she saw instead surprised her, a man reaching across a divide of experience and privilege, recognizing something in her that she'd almost forgotten existed. Her dignity. Her determination. Her worth beyond her current circumstances. Why? She asked simply. Alexander's gaze returned to Sarah's photograph. Because 5 years ago, I couldn't save someone I loved. But today, maybe I can help someone who deserves a chance. In that moment, something shifted between them, not romance or even friendship yet, but a connection forged in the shared understanding that sometimes, the world breaks apart, and you have to build something new from the pieces that remain. Try again, Mrs. Fenton instructed, watching as Maya attempted to create the perfect hospital corner on the bed in the East guest suite. Tuck it deeper, then pull tight as you fold over. Maya followed the directions, her movements more confident than they had been 2 weeks earlier. The pristine corner that resulted earned a nod of approval from the older woman. You're a quick study, Mrs. Fenton remarked. Most people take months to get my standards. Maya smiled, grateful for the praise but even more grateful for the routine that had developed. Mornings were spent learning the intricate workings of the estate, everything from table settings for different occasions to the proper care of antique furniture. Afternoons were devoted to the triplets, who thrived in the nursery Mrs. Fenton had helped her set up in the carriage house. The small building behind the main house had been transformed from a dusty storage space to a cozy home. Alexander had insisted on new furniture, though Maya had protested the expense. "Consider it an investment in good employees," he'd said, in a tone that brooked no argument. Now, as she finished making the bed, Maya caught sight of Alexander through the window. He was in the garden, suited as always, but his jacket was off and his sleeves rolled up. More surprising was the sight of Theo perched on his hip, tiny hands grabbing at Alexander's tie while the billionaire pointed out something in the flower beds. "He's different with them," Mrs. Fenton remarked, following Maya's gaze. "Different than he's been since Sarah died." Maya turned, surprised by the personal observation from the usually reserved housekeeper. "How so?" Mrs. Fenton's eyes remained on Alexander. "For 5 years, he's been a ghost in his own life. Working 18-hour days, barely eating, never sleeping. The staff worried, but no one knew how to reach him." She looked at Maya directly. "Until you four arrived." Maya hadn't noticed the change, having no baseline for comparison. But watching now, she could see what Mrs. Fenton meant. Alexander's face as he talked to Theo held an animation that seemed at odds with the stern, controlled man she'd first met. Later that evening, after the triplets were asleep in their cribs, Maya sat on the small porch of the carriage house, enjoying the rare moment of solitude. The sound of footsteps on the gravel path made her look up. Alexander approached, still in his work clothes but with his tie loosened. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Maya gestured to the empty chair beside her. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk. "Mrs. Fenton says you're doing well with the training," Alexander said finally. "She's a good teacher. Exacting, but fair." "That she is." A smile touched his lips. "She terrified me when I was a boy. My parents hired her when I was 12. I thought she had eyes in the back of her head." The image of a young Alexander, intimidated by the proper housekeeper, made Maya smile. "I can see that." Another silence fell, but it wasn't uncomfortable. After living under the same roof or at least on the same property for nearly a month, they had developed an odd sort of familiarity. Not quite friendship, but something more than employer and employee. "I saw you with Theo today," Maya said. "In the garden?" Alexander nodded. "He has a strong grip for someone so small." "They all do." Maya's voice softened with pride. "Dr. Winters says they're reaching all their milestones now. Catching up. They're remarkable children," Alexander said, his voice equally soft. "You've done an incredible job with them, Maya. Under impossible circumstances." The simple acknowledgement of her struggle, her effort, her love brought unexpected tears to Maya's eyes. She blinked them away quickly, but not before Alexander noticed. "I've upset you," he said, concern evident in his voice. Maya shook her head. "No, it's not that. It's just, no one has said that before. That I did a good job. Most people just saw the mess, homeless girl, 3 babies, disaster waiting to happen." Alexander was quiet for a moment. "I know something about being judged by appearances," he said finally. "After Sarah died, everyone had opinions about how I should grieve, how I should move forward. The business papers called me focused and driven when I worked around the clock. In reality, I was just running from empty rooms and memories. The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it did Maya. Alexander Pierce wasn't known for personal revelations. His rare interviews were strictly business-focused, his public persona carefully controlled. "It's hard," Maya said simply. "Moving forward when part of you is still looking back, wondering if you could have done something differently." Alexander's gaze met hers, recognition flaring. "Yes," he said quietly. "Exactly that." In that moment, something shifted between them, a deepening of the connection that had been building gradually over the past weeks. Not romance, not yet, but a genuine understanding that transcended their different backgrounds. "Maya," he said after a moment, "there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you." Her guard rose automatically, old instincts difficult to suppress. "Oh. It's about the triplets' future. Their education, specifically." Maya tensed. The triplets were barely 9 months old. Education was years away. Yet the thought of them growing up here, in Alexander's world of privilege and opportunity, while still being somehow separate the helps children, made her heart ache. "There's a trust," Alexander continued, seemingly unaware of her inner turmoil. "I set it up years ago for Sarah's education. It's just sitting there, untouched. I'd like to use it for Ellie, Theo, and Milo." Maya stared at him, stunned. "Alexander, that's too much. We can't accept that." "Why not?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Because it was meant for Sarah. Your daughter." Alexander's expression softened. "Sarah would have wanted it used for something good. She was like that, always sharing her toys, her books, her time." Maya shook her head, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Alexander urged gently. "Let me do this, Maya. Not just for them, but for me. Having a purpose again, a future to plan for, children to watch grow. It's given me back something I thought was gone forever." The admission hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Maya looked at this man, this billionaire who could buy anything but had somehow lost everything that mattered, and saw not an employer or a benefactor, but a person rebuilding himself piece by piece, just as she was. "Okay," she said finally. "For the triplets. But I want to contribute too, when I can. They should know that both of us believed in their future." Alexander nodded, understanding the importance of her pride, her need to provide for her siblings despite his vastly greater resources. "It's a deal," he said, extending his hand formally. Maya took it, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers, the strength in his grip. In that handshake was a promise, not just for the triplets' future, but perhaps for something more, something neither of them was quite ready to name. As they sat together watching the fireflies dance across the lawn, Maya realized that in the most unexpected way, they had each given the other a precious gift, the chance to believe in tomorrow again. Summer faded into autumn, bringing with it a rhythm to life at the Pierce estate that Maya had never experienced before, a sense of stability and purpose that had been missing since her mother's death. The triplets thrived, growing from fragile infants into sturdy, curious toddlers who explored their world with fearless enthusiasm. Maya's role had evolved as well. What began as housekeeping training expanded to include estate management, event planning, and even occasional assistance with Alexander's charitable foundation. Mrs. Fenton, recognizing Maya's quick intelligence, had accelerated the training schedule. "You have a gift for organization," the older woman remarked one afternoon as they reviewed staff schedules for an upcoming fundraiser. and for understanding what people need before they ask for it. The compliment warmed Maya, who had spent most of her life feeling perpetually behind, struggling to catch up, to survive, never having the luxury of planning ahead. Alexander, too, had changed over the months. The stern, remote figure who had once intimidated her had given way to a man who smiled more easily, who made time in his demanding schedule to read bedtime stories to the triplets, who sometimes joined Maya for coffee on the carriage house porch after the children were asleep. It was during one such evening, with October's chill sharpening the air, that Alexander brought a photo album to their usual meeting place. "I found something today," he said, settling into the chair beside Maya, while going through some old papers in the study. Maya wrapped her hands around her mug, curious. "What kind of something?" Alexander opened the album carefully. "Do you have any pictures of your mother?" The question caught Maya off guard. "Just one," she said, thinking of the worn photograph she kept in her mother's locket. "Why?" Alexander turned the album toward her. "Is this her?" Maya leaned forward, nearly spilling her coffee in shock. There on the glossy page was her mother younger, her hair longer than Maya remembered, but unmistakably Elena Reyes standing beside a large Christmas tree in what was clearly the main house's entrance hall. She wore a simple black dress with a white apron, clearly part of a server's uniform. "Where did you get this?" Maya whispered, touching the photo with trembling fingers. "It's from a Christmas party, about 6 years ago," Alexander explained. "I had forgotten until I saw the album, but your mother worked an event here once, not directly for us, but for the catering company we used." Maya stared at the image, drinking in details of her mother that she'd started to forget: the exact curve of her smile, the way she held her shoulders, the sparkle in her eyes even when she was working. "There's more," Alexander said quietly, turning the page. The next photo made Maya's breath catch. Elena knelt beside a small girl with red gold hair, Sarah, unmistakably helping her arrange ornaments on a miniature Christmas tree in what appeared to be a child's bedroom. "Sarah wasn't supposed to be at the party," Alexander explained, his voice soft with memory. "It was adults only, very formal. But her mother had a last-minute work emergency, and the nanny was sick. I had Sarah upstairs in her room, promising I'd check on her between greeting guests." Maya looked up at him, sensing where this story was heading. "I got caught up in the party," Alexander continued, regret coloring his words. "Important clients, potential investors. I told myself I'd go up in just 5 more minutes for over an hour. When I finally went to check on her, I found this scene." He gestured to the photograph. "Your mother had somehow found Sarah alone and crying. Instead of ignoring her or telling me, she had taken it upon herself to comfort her." Maya's eyes filled with tears. It was so like her mother, seeing a need and filling it without fanfare or expectation of reward. "Sarah told me your mother had heard her crying and had brought up a tray with milk and cookies," Alexander continued. "She stayed with her, helped her decorate the little tree so she wouldn't feel left out of the party. Sarah talked about her for weeks afterward, the Christmas angel lady." The story pierced Maya's heart. "That sounds like Mom," she whispered. "She always said no one should be alone on holidays." Alexander turned another page. This photo showed Elena and Sarah sitting side by side on the bed, a storybook open between them. The little girl was leaning trustingly against Elena's side, her expression rapt as Elena clearly read aloud. "I took these pictures when I came up and found them," Alexander explained. "I meant to find out your mother's name, to thank her properly, maybe offer her a permanent position here. But then there was a crisis at the Tokyo office, and I flew out that night. By the time I returned, the holiday season was over, the catering staff long gone. I never found out who she was. Maya stared at the photos, a strange feeling building in her chest, part grief, part wonder, part understanding of connections that ran deeper than chance. 3 months after this party, Alexander said quietly, "Sarah died." And in my grief, I forgot all about the kind server who had comforted my daughter on Christmas Eve. The revelation hung in the air between them, this thread connecting their lives long before that morning in the park when Alexander had found Maya and the triplets. "Do you believe in fate?" Maya asked softly, looking up from the album to meet Alexander's gaze. The question seemed to surprise him. Alexander Pears, with his data-driven decisions and strategic planning, wasn't a man given to metaphysical contemplation. And yet, "I never did," he admitted. "Until recently." Maya closed the album gently, her fingers lingering on its cover. "My mother always said there are no coincidences. That people come into our lives exactly when we need them, even if we don't recognize it at the time." Alexander was quiet for a long moment, considering. "Your mother gave Sarah comfort when I failed to," he said finally. "And now, somehow, I've been given the chance to help her daughter and grandchildren." "Full circle," Maya murmured. They sat in silence as darkness settled around them, each lost in thoughts of those they had loved and lost, and the mysterious ways their lives had intersected across time. Finally, Alexander spoke, his voice carrying a certainty that hadn't been there before. "Maya, I don't think you and the triplets coming into my life was random. I don't think any of this was random." The intensity in his eyes made Maya's heart beat faster. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying." He paused, searching for words. "I'm saying that I think your mother and Sarah somehow engineered this. That they've been watching over all of us." From anyone else, such a statement would have sounded trite, even ridiculous. But from Alexander, practical, logical Alexander, it carried the weight of profound truth. "I think so too," Maya whispered, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "I've felt her with me sometimes, especially in the hardest moments. Guiding me." Alexander reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. The gesture was simple but intimate, the first time he had initiated physical contact beyond the occasional handshake or passing a baby between them. "Maya," he said, his voice low and certain, "finding you and the triplets wasn't just about saving you. I think, maybe, it was about saving me too." In that moment, with the photo album between them and the stars emerging overhead, Maya felt something shift and settle into place, as if the universe had finally revealed a design that had been there all along, waiting for them to discover it. Winter arrived with unexpected gentleness, dusting the estate with light snow that transformed the gardens into a glittering wonderland. Inside the main house, preparations for Christmas had taken on an enthusiasm that surprised the staff, who had grown accustomed to Alexander's indifference toward holidays in the years since Sarah's death. This year was different. A massive fir tree stood in the entrance hall, its branches laden with ornaments that Maya and Alexander had carefully selected for each member of their unusual household. The triplets, now 14 months old and walking with wobbly determination, were fascinated by the twinkling lights and shiny decorations that remained tantalizingly out of reach behind a child gate. "Ellie, no climbing," Maya warned, catching her sister mid-attempt to scale the protective barrier. At 14 months, Ellie had established herself as the most adventurous of the triplets, always the first to attempt new physical feats. She's going to be scaling mountains by kindergarten, Alexander remarked, entering the room with a stack of mail in his hands. The affection in his voice was unmistakable. Maya smiled, lifting Ellie into her arms. More likely breaking into secure facilities. She has that look in her eye. The ease between them still surprised Maya. Sometimes this comfortable rapport that had developed so gradually she couldn't pinpoint when Alexander had transformed from intimidating benefactor to essential part of their daily lives. Not quite family, not quite friend, something undefined but precious nonetheless. Alexander settled into an armchair, watching as Theo and Milo played with wooden blocks on the floor nearby. "I have something to discuss with you," he said, his tone shifting to something more serious. Maya sat down across from him, settling Ellie on her lap. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous. Important." Alexander set aside the mail and leaned forward slightly. "I've been thinking about the future. The triplets' future, specifically." Maya tensed involuntarily. Despite the trust they had built, old fears died hard. The expectation that security was always temporary, that happiness came with expiration dates. "Mrs. Fenton retires in 3 months, Alexander continued. "You've completed her training program with flying colors. By all accounts, you're more than ready to take over as estate manager." "I am," Maya confirmed, unsure where this was heading. "The thing is," Alexander said carefully, "I'm not sure that's the right path for you anymore." Maya's heart sank. "You're not satisfied with my work?" "God, no, nothing like that," Alexander said quickly, realizing his misstep. "Your work has been exceptional. But I've watched you these past months, how quickly you absorb information, how you've taken on responsibilities far beyond housekeeping. You're capable of much more, Maya." Relief mingled with confusion. "I don't understand." Alexander drew a deep breath. "I want to offer you a different position. As director of the Pierce Foundation's new family support initiative. It would involve developing programs for single parents, creating emergency housing solutions, establishing scholarship funds, essentially, building the support system that wasn't there for you when you needed it." Maya stared at him, stunned. "Alexander, I don't have the qualifications for something like that. I never even finished high school." "You have the most important qualification: lived experience. You know exactly what families in crisis need because you've been there." His eyes held hers steadily. "As for education, part of the offer includes completing your GED and pursuing a college degree, with full tuition covered by the foundation." The opportunity was so far beyond anything Maya had imagined for herself that she couldn't form a response. Ellie squirmed in her lap, sensing her distraction, and Maya automatically adjusted her hold. "It's too much," she said finally. "It's not charity," Alexander countered, anticipating her objection. "It's investment in talent. In someone who can make a real difference." He paused, then added more softly, "Besides, it's selfish too. I want the triplets here, Maya. I want to watch them grow up. I want to be part of their lives." The admission hung in the air between them, layered with meanings neither was quite ready to articulate fully. "And what about us?" Maya asked, the question slipping out before she could reconsider. "Where do we fit in all this?" Alexander's expression softened. "That's the other thing I wanted to discuss." He rose from his chair and, to Maya's astonishment, knelt before her, taking her free hand in his. "I'm not doing this right," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "I had a whole speech prepared, and now I can't remember a word of it. Maya's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he must hear it. Alexander. These past months have shown me what I've been missing for years, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Not just since Sarah died, but maybe always. Family. Connection. Purpose beyond the next deal or acquisition. Ellie reached out curiously, patting Alexander's cheek with her small hand. He caught it gently, pressing a kiss to her palm without breaking eye contact with Maya. I'm not asking for an answer today, he continued. Or even an answer at all, if you're not ready. But I want you to know that I've fallen in love with you, Maya Reyes. With your strength, your dignity, your capacity for love despite everything life has thrown at you. And if you could see a future where we build something together not just for the triplets, but for ourselves, I would count myself the luckiest man alive. Tears filled Maya's eyes, blurring her vision. This man who had once seemed so unreachable, so belonging to another world, had become essential to her in ways she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge fully until this moment. I'm afraid, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Of what? Of believing this can be real. That someone like you could love someone like me. That happiness doesn't always get taken away. Alexander's expression was tender but determined. Maya, look at me. Really look. He waited until her eyes met his. We've both lost enough to know that nothing is guaranteed. But that's exactly why we should grab onto joy with both hands when we find it. Life is too short for anything else. Theo and Milo, sensing the emotional shift in the room, abandoned their blocks and toddled over, clutching at Alexander's suit pants for balance. He gathered them close with his free arm, still holding Maya's hand. The sight of him there, this powerful man who commanded boardrooms and business empires, kneeling on the floor with 3 toddlers and looking at her as if she were the most precious thing he had ever seen, broke the last of Maya's resistance. Yes, she whispered, tears flowing freely now. Yes to all of it. Alexander's smile was radiant as he rose, still holding her hand, and leaned in to kiss her for the first time, gentle, reverent, full of promise. Outside, snow began to fall more heavily, coating the world in pristine white. Inside, warmed by the fire and by love that had grown in the most unexpected soil, they began to plan their future not as savior and saved, not as employer and employee, but as equals who had found in each other exactly what they needed to become whole again. Later that night, after the triplets were asleep in their beds in the carriage house, Maya stood by the window watching the snow. Alexander's arms encircled her from behind, his chin resting on top of her head. What are you thinking? He asked softly. Maya leaned back against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. I was thinking about my mother. About how she'd feel knowing her grandchildren will grow up here, safe and loved. She'd be proud of you, Alexander murmured. So proud of how you kept them together, how you never gave up. Maya turned in his arms to face him. Do you think Sarah would approve? Of us, of the triplets being part of your life? Alexander's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. I know she would. She always had room in her heart for more love. Just like her Christmas angel taught her. In that moment, Maya could almost feel her mother's presence not as a ghost or a memory, but as a continuing thread in the tapestry of their lives, woven into the very fabric of this new family they were creating together. Merry Christmas, Mom, she whispered. Thank you for leading us home. Sometimes, the universe conspires to bring people together across seemingly insurmountable divides. Alexander and Maya's story reminds us that healing often comes from unexpected directions, that the hand reaching out to save us may belong to someone whose own wounds mirror our own in ways we cannot initially see. Their journey teaches us that true wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts or stock portfolios. It lies in the courage to remain open to love even after devastating loss, in the strength to accept help without surrendering dignity, in the wisdom to recognize that our deepest connections often transcend logic and circumstance. Perhaps most powerfully, their story speaks to the invisible threads that bind us across time and space. Elena's simple act of kindness toward a lonely child at Christmas created ripples that would, years later, save her own daughter and grandchildren from despair. Sarah's brief life, though cut tragically short, ultimately guided her father toward a second chance at family and purpose. In a world that often seems random and cruel, Alexander and Maya found meaning in their suffering, not because the pain itself had purpose, but because they chose to transform it into compassion, into action, into love that expanded beyond themselves to touch countless other lives. Their story isn't just about romantic love or even family bonds. It's about recognizing that sometimes, our broken pieces fit perfectly with someone else's, creating something stronger and more beautiful than either could have achieved alone. If this story touched something in your heart today, please take a moment to reflect on the unexpected connections in your own life. Who has appeared at just the right moment to offer help when you needed it most? Whose life might be waiting for you to reach out and make a difference? Share this video with someone who needs reminding that even our darkest moments can lead to unexpected light, that the universe sometimes has plans we cannot see until they've already begun unfolding around us. Remember, too, that kindness ripples forward in ways we may never witness. Elena never knew how her compassion toward a lonely child would ultimately save her own family. Your seemingly small act of generosity today might change someone's entire future. Hit the like button if you believe in these invisible connections that bind us. Subscribe to hear more stories that remind us of our shared humanity and the extraordinary ways ordinary people find strength in their most vulnerable moments. And finally, look around you right now. Is there someone in your life who's struggling silently, too proud or afraid to ask for help? Be their Alexander. Be the person who sees beyond circumstances to the dignity and potential within. One gesture, one moment of true seeing, might be all it takes to change everything.